Welcome, folks, to the Knights of the Wrong Table podcast. I'm John.
I am Randall.
And we have a special guest today, Zachary, as well. So thank you, Zachary, for joining in today.
Thanks for creating the space and having me, gentlemen. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. So, Randall, looks like the Grim Reaper did not come knocking on my door this week in fantasy or last week in fantasy football. So
No, 5-1. We have a 12-person league, Zachary. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Going now for, I think it's our 14th season. We have a trophy that rotates between the crew. It's a big deal for us. Long story short, 5-1 is it's still a comfortable position to be. I think there's 4 other people in the league that are currently 5-1. I dropped down to second place with my points for. Somehow the person who's in first did not even start a wide receiver last week.
Isn't that usually like a minimum required position?
It was frustrating as all hell watching it happen.
So who's your main scoring guy? Who's been your most consistent week to week guy on your team?
Well, I've got Lamar Jackson and I've been pretty happy with it, but he pulled up with a bum hamstring.
Not going to be so consistent now. So
exactly.
Oh man, and then that was the thing, was the key for my team was health. And then this week I had that young wide receiver down in Tampa Bay went down, the Amir McBooga, he went down, and then Lamar Jackson went down, and I lost Quinton Johnson down in California for the Chargers. It was tough. It's a tough week,
Your
man.
fantasy team sounds a lot like my team that I root for in the NFL, the 49ers.
Niners. Man, it's been rough.
Every game is just like, all right, there goes Bosa. All right, there goes Kittle. All right, there goes. We just lost Fred Warner last game. It's like we have no one we are throwing to. Our best wideout now plays for Washington. It's like, man, we're just decrumbling little by little.
Hey, McCaffrey's healthy though,
but he seems like he's lost a step. To be honest,
like you can't ask him to do it all. I think is just kind of it's
that's
a lot more.
Very fair. When we don't have anyone down the field to distract them, they know we're gonna throw right to CMC. You're right, but
I'm a 49ers fan on the East Coast, huh?
Well, I didn't really have anyone to follow. My dad was a 49ers fan because he loves Steve Young in Montana. And then when we got to Delaware, it was be an Eagles fan or just be the fan of the team my dad follows. And I just went that route.
There you go.
Good choice.
Luckily, because these fan bases kind of stink.
Yeah. Eagles fans are pretty insufferable too. So good choice.
Yeah.
Even when they win, they're insufferable. I can't stand them when they win and they lose. It's tough. Nobody likes talking to a fan where they're constantly losing. But man, they're the worst even when they win. You're right. They're insufferable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you, Randall, for
not bad. Congratulations for the win. You are better this last week.
Yep. Yeah, Jonathan
bounce back.
Jonathan Taylor is always my go-to this year because I picked Saquon and Jonathan Taylor right off the bat, and some of our viewers know this. We talked about it before, but then I forgot that we're in the Superflex league, so I did not pick up a second quarterback. So, but I got.
Oh, you're on a 2 quarterback league. Got it. Okay.
Yep. Superflex 2 quarterback, and but Sam Darnold's been producing pretty good. So. Yeah, so we'll see.
He's been on
the Seahawks have been playing pretty well recently too, just as a whole unit. Normally with them, it's their defense that will be really good, and their offense is kind of like or the other way around, vice versa. But this last couple of weeks have been playing pretty well.
Not to drown out the football topic, because I know we got more to talk about, but man, the quarterback surprised me a ton this year so far. Drake May.
Yeah, as a Bills fan, it pains me to see the Patriots be good again.
They're balling, dude. Their defense is stout. My brother is a Patriots fan, so we always be watching. I'm like, yo, this year y'all are different. Y'all are looking put together.
Yeah, they've got that Booty is also really good. That
Kevin Booty, yeah,
he's been pretty great.
Booty.
Plus, with a name like Booty, you can't go bad.
Yeah, it's like a running back named Dash. Like you're gonna be good.
You're gonna be good.
You better hope. You better hope.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then we got the Mariners postseason doing pretty good there, so we're definitely excited. Talking about just local sports franchises here, how they have been quite disappointing over the years.
I forgot you guys had a baseball team until you just said it.
We're in the championship series, man. Come on now.
The Mariners have always been considered like a farm team. They develop good players and then they move on somewhere else and then they be great. You know what I mean?
Baseball is also just so random. You can literally be the worst team to make it just barely in the wild card, and boom, you're in the World Series. Like, I
Yeah.
remember my dad as a Cardinals fan, that happened like 3 different times. It's just such a random sport. But then you
During
get
the
something like
fall series,
basketball
yeah.
where it's like, you know who's gonna win it by the first tip off of the opening game. So baseball kind of is fun that way.
Hockey just started up too the other day too, I think, a couple days ago. I gotta check that out.
That's a sport I need to get into.
Same, especially because we have the Kraken here now. So, all right. Well, thank you, Zachary, for joining. And for our guests that don't know, Zachary is a realtor hailing from the great state of Delaware. After many successful years selling homes and getting to the top of his local real estate market, Zachary was left with a feeling that his true mission was only just beginning. He saw that after COVID, we are left with home prices out of reach for many younger buyers. He uses his impressive social media presence to encourage people that the pain that they feel is actually real. He understands there's something powerful about validating experiences while trying to educate and improve the outcomes of his followers and their families. And we know this because we are some of those followers. So, Zachary, thank you for joining us on the Nights of the Wrong Table.
Dude, thank you for having me. And that was a heck of an intro, but I got to correct you at one point. You said it felt like my mission was just beginning. I felt like my mission was failing at that time when I saw people to my left and to my right just not being able to afford the very thing I was so passionately selling. I felt crummy.
And, it's kind of talking about with missions starting. I think we mentioned this a little bit off camera when we started, but you're actually one of the reasons I felt like I started getting involved and getting a little bit loud on social media. With you highlighted on the front of my Facebook profile there, um, talking about corporate CEO pay, what it is, what it should be. Right, it went from uh, back during Plato times, it was 6 to 1 is what they recommended, and now it's in the hundreds of times to one. So it's just,
Yeah, about 396 to 1, I think is the median.
yeah, absolutely insane. So, but yeah, so thank you for coming on, and we just wanted to talk about the American Dream. We wanted to talk about that product that you sell, because I know Randall and we're blessed enough, we're lucky enough to have homes of our own. We look to people around us, that might not be as blessed or as fortunate as we are. We have no idea how some people are making it these days. We have no idea how they're going to be able to attain the American dream. So, and one of the things that also I feel like with getting loud on Facebook did for me was it definitely did not get me did not get me any sympathy from the older generations on Facebook who really just don't know. It seems like there's a disconnect right now with they don't know what we're going through. Could be living on a street in America and you have people in two completely different realities. Um, they they don't see our struggle. They don't see us struggling more than they did relative to the percentage of income spent on housing. Is there anything that you feel like you could say to that older generation to more or less validate our experience, or even I don't even know how Gen Z is making it right now.
Validate it first to any boomer I talk to. I'd validate it first because there is truth to when they say the economy they live in is not nearly as bad as what they hear from the younger generations talking about. And the reason for that is we're in technical terms a bifurcated economy or a K-shaped economy. And that K-shaped economy has been defined by what you guys just mentioned. Did you own an appreciating asset pre-COVID or not? If you did, your net worth's up. If you own stocks, if you own bonds, if you owned gold, if you owned crypto, a house, an old car that's holding value, a watch collection, it all inflated. So if you owned something that grew with it, your value was up. But if you only had cash, if you only had a little nest egg of 10, 20,000, $30,000, and you didn't have a home, you didn't have a stock portfolio, you hadn't started an IRA, well, the opposite end of the spectrum is true. And that economy is struggling. That economy is not showing up in consumer spend. That side of the economy is struggling month to month. And large part, the people who are a part of that group, kind of by force, is the Gen Z generation. There are some millennials in there that sit on the opposite end of the spectrum simply because they didn't get their hands on an asset, sure.
Right.
But when we look at Gen Z, mathematically, they just simply aren't being given a chance. They're
Yeah.
showing up to a game of Monopoly when there's already hotels on most all of the spots, and we're telling them to just roll the dice. And it doesn't seem fair. And it is a conversation I have often with a boomer, but it's mathematically different today than it has been in any given year we've ever experienced.
So what would you say to those boomers who even I know I've presented them with those facts too, and it just seems like, shut up, kid. Bootstrap it up. We went through it too.
You're going to get that. You're going to get that. In fact, I just had a conversation on my podcast with a man by the name of Tom Ferry. He's a good name in the real estate industry. He's a titan in the real estate coaching industry. But if you're outside of real estate, you probably don't know him. He is a multimillionaire, not boomer, but Gen Xer. And we went back and forth on this very topic. It's difficult, especially in a short-term setting, to be able to convince somebody of something they believe to be true their entire life. And this is true of how you view the economy, to how you view politics, to how you view war, to how you view sports. A lot of it is indoctrinated within the community you grow up in, the family you come up in, and that's just what you believe to be true. And the problem, I think, that comes with this conversation is ultimately what they believe to be true was indeed true for a very long period of their life. So it's difficult to convince them otherwise. And that's not where I bring the topic. The topic is usually centered around, and this is just my strategy, questions. Because if you get into the weeds with them and start trying to tell them what it is, well, they're going to tell you their version of reality. And ultimately, you're just going to be arguing two different points of reality. The point of it is, I want us both to be able to stand in our neutral points of not having to be a part of either. Just ask some general questions. Why do you think Gen Z isn't working hard? And then they'll get to the end of blah, blah, blah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they need to make more money? Okay, well, let's look at the median income, and slowly work our way into a data point that we can go up against. Little by little, you'll hear the conversation. Well, they need to go out and get $150 car payment. Everyone wants a really nice car. Well, the Experian used car median is 514. If someone's frugal and gets a 70% value of that, maybe it's 320, but that's still double what you're saying. Oh, they need this, they need that. Well, if they don't have a phone and don't have Wi-Fi, they can't work their job. And if they don't have power, which is going up every single month, none of those things work either. So again, I try to get it down to the baseline of the argument, which is normally scrape and get by. That's usually where it gets to. I had to scrape to get by. And today, mathematically, scraping is a lot more expensive. And that's usually where we get to, is just getting by today is not something you can do for $1,800 a month with a family. It's not possible. You're paying more than that in just the rent.
Exactly. Yeah. I can
Yeah,
tell.
I think a report came out just the other day that it's now impossible to live in any of the 50 states in the United States if you work a minimum of 40-hour work week of minimum wage.
I saw that too.
People,
It's more than that. I think
yeah,
that actually is closer to all 50 states are unaffordable to own a home if you make less than 56 grand a year, which is closer to $25 an hour,
yeah,
which
And
is a
what
very unfortunate stat.
and
it's
the
a lot
federal
more than
minimum
minimum.
wage is what, what is
I
it
think it's
now?
786 or 782.
They just said
Oh,
too. I think I saw today on the way up from just dropping my daughter off at school on the way into the door. The median price for a car is now like $50,000
yep.
for a new
Brand new
car.
car.
Yep, new car.
Just if you guys remember during the COVID market, the price of used cars was astronomical, and that never really kind of balanced out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people right now that are like you're saying without access to internet and without access to a lot of things. A car for a lot of people in more rural areas is a connection source to a
Have to.
community, and if you can't afford that, it's even worse.
Well, so we're talking about stats. Let me read a couple that I had from our last show, if you guys don't mind, real quick.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Because I
please.
have some of the cost and how they've increased since COVID, because that's really the number of where it starts. So, like today, a starter home in America, according to the National Association of Realtors, is $365,000. It's the median starter home in America. The qualifying income to get into that home is $106,000. And when we look at the average person buying their first home, they make $68,000. So there's a gigantic gap in that math to the tune of about $36,000 of what you need to make versus what the average person is making. Then you get into the how many 30-year-olds own a home and are married. In 1990 and every year beforehand, it was above 50%. Now it's 12.1%. We've gone
Holy
from 1 out of
moly.
2 to 1 out of 8.
Wow.
Significant. Electric is up 68% since 2020. Healthcare is up 21.2%. Housing costs up 57%. Food at home is up 23.6%. And the median used car payment is $514, which again, since COVID is up 48.2%. But can I shout out the homeowners real quick? The people who bought a home 2020 and before, if they had that interest rate, really it's 2022 and before, winter of 2022 and before when rates started to go up. If they got their home in that time frame, per year, they're paying about $9,602 in interest. Interest only. It's not going toward the principal, insurance, taxes. If you got that same home today and had to pay that same today's mortgage rate, which is much higher, your interest isn't going to be $9,602 a year. It's $24,687. So we've gone from the median the median pay for a teacher in 2018 as just the interest for owning that home. And that, frankly, as a realtor, has spurred me in the direction of the very unpopular take within my profession for pushing certain people away from buying a home. There are other assets that you can own. There are other things that you can buy and accumulate that can increase your net worth that don't require you to pay an arm and a leg every year to a bank.
Yeah. That's wild. Absolutely wild. And when you're talking about unpopular opinions, so we wanted to get your take on what could be maybe getting you into hot water with some of your other realtors, but we're going to ask you the question anyways. What would you say to those realtors who are selling homes to corporations like Blackstone, whose niche is selling to Blackstone and other institutional investors, and is driving, even more so than driving, these home prices out of control?
I'd say keep doing it. And I'd say that for two reasons. One is because no matter whether or not you represent that institutional investor or not, they are going to buy. They're going to buy it. And I'll tell you another thing is a lot of these companies aren't even using a quote unquote realtor. There might be one on paper, but for the most part, like for example, Blackstone, you mentioned, they own over 308,000 real estate units across the country right now. A lot of that ownership isn't them actually just going to the closing table to buy a property. It's very, very minimal the amount of times that's happening. A lot of times they're buying entire companies that already have a portfolio of homes. Like, for example, Invitation Homes had 82 grand, and then they just bought Invitation Homes, and now they have 82,000 new homes they're managing. BlackRock does it similarly in the commercial world and the kind of industrial world. Like they're buying power grids and canals and water sources. They're buying things that they know we're always going to pay for. And Blackstone does it kind of similarly, but a little bit differently. A lot of people always yell, BlackRock, BlackRock. Yes, I hate BlackRock too, but on this side, it's actually Blackstone. The other side of it is to the misconception. This is a crazy stat. In 2020, we got to the point where 1 out of 5, 20% of all homes that hit the market were bought by investors. 1 out of every 5. 1 out of every 5.
Wow.
By 2024, the number got up to 26%. So now we're at 1 out of 4 as of last year. And for the first time in 2020, you'll find this stat interesting, is that they beat first-time home buyers in purchasing.
Right.
There were more purchases by investors than there were first-time buyers for the first time in our housing market's history.
Yep.
2025, we just got the numbers for Q2. It's gone from 1 out of 5 to 1 out of 4 to now 33%. It's 32.8%.
So this rise is just astronomical over time.
Yeah, 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, it's not largely bolstered by these gigantic corporations that we want to blame for everything. A lot of it is the mom and pop. In fact, the majority of it is the person who owns 1 to 10 units. They want their fifth rental property. They want their second vacation home. They want their third Airbnb. They want something else to basically glob onto to create more income for themselves, and not necessarily a giganto corporation. But they are doing things that are hurting us. Like, for example, Blackstone owns Tricon Residential, and Tricon Residential is building build-to-rent neighborhoods that are going to never be sold. They're only going to be rented out.
Interesting.
These large corporations aren't worried necessarily about owning more real estate, in my opinion. They're interested in creating a world where we are perpetual member of the United States economy. Like, we're going to get into a world where everything is a subscription. I believe we're going to get to a point where someone like a Tesla is going to say, you can get into our car for free, but you pay a monthly subscription for its ownership, and we will come get it if you don't pay it. And if you want access to the cool features of the car, you can pay a higher subscription fee. I think we're really getting close to that world. And it can be stopped in ways that would take a lot of legislation. But what I would say overall to the professionals, keep going. They're going to keep doing it. This needs to get fixed from the government.
Are you seeing the same kind of trends in other countries, or is this like America's paving the way for this?
This is not this is not just America. I've talked to economists from everywhere from South Korea and Australia to Britain and areas around there. It's everywhere. BlackRock, for example, they're buying stuff in Australia. They're buying and creating real estate investment trusts in India. They're having it. They've invested in about 18 different companies that we have black flagged in China. They're all over the place. And to me, a company that has a majority share in terms of all the other public investors, a majority share of 86% of our stock market, also being very well diversified worldwide, is scary.
Yeah.
Because they can just, we're moving over here. And they could just completely pull the rug out from their entire economy if they'd like to. But we've gotten to that point where there's almost nothing we could do about it because they're so deep in everything.
Right. I do the company I work for is based out of Canada, so I do a lot of work with Canadian farmers, Canadian agriculture and stuff like that. And I'm up there quite often, and it's actually quite eye-opening when I visit coworkers of mine and friends of mine. Some of them can't afford to live and get their own homes. They have to have roommates. They do, there'll be a person in their mid-30s with an extremely successful job, but they're like, I can't afford to buy a house. Do you know the cost of a house, in the outskirts of Vancouver? It's incredible, and I've been out all over the country. I've been to the east side, I've been to the west side, and both of them, the people will laugh in your face and they're like, I can't afford to live, at this small little bungalow home. And they'll look it up online and it's 800,000 Canadian dollars. And it's it's nuts when you think about that, in the disparity for the first starter home not even being attainable. For them, it's already a process. There's friends of mine who live on, they'll have a large property. Excuse me. They'll have a large property that they just, put a small tiny home in and let their sister or their brother live in that tiny home for a while to save up enough money to maybe get an apartment somewhere that they can have a nest egg and eat off of for the rent. And when you look at that for the American average income, the amount of density we have in cities, it's just not attainable. Portland, Oregon, for example, where I live, I'm really close to Portland. During COVID, a majority of downtown, the pricing now is way out of the reach for the average citizen of the city. So a lot of people flooded out of downtown Portland. Now all the businesses are suffering because there's no one to go to restaurants. There's no one to go to bars. There's no one downtown but these large businesses, which are still there, but no one lives downtown because no one can afford to. They've been priced out. So when that next wave of people inevitably slowly creep back into the city, those prices aren't going to come back down. They're stuck at where they're at. Yeah. So it's shocking to see the mass exoduses out of areas just purely because people can't afford to live. Yeah. It's not something you'd expect to see in the United States.
I'd expect to see the Great Migration continue. I think we're already seeing it happen. I don't think it's a super hot take to say that people are flocking to more affordable areas. Delaware, I'm already seeing it, and we have started seeing it for the last 2.5 years in the retirement genre. A lot of people that got way more money out of the stock market, their retirement fund, and their own home than they expected to since 2020. Again, that K-shaped economy. that are thinking, well, why don't we go ahead and retire? And Florida's becoming a less appealing option, and areas up the East Coast beach wise, Delaware is the most affordable option. No shopping tax, and it's growing. Okay, let's go there. We can still get a $400,000, $500,000 home. So we're already seeing it in certain genres of the population. What I think you're asking though is, are we going to start seeing the common person moving out of, highly populated, typically more expensive areas? Yeah. Yeah. And who knows what's going to come from that with the Midwest not really having a lot of
Oh,
income
I think we
supporting
lost you
jobs?
there.
Will there be a lot of digital work?
Oh,
What's going to happen to these areas where people flood out of? Will it only be big corps that can survive because small businesses can't afford to keep people in there? Uh, there's a lot of speculation, I suppose, on what could happen, but I do think for a fact that at a micro level, every, especially Gen Z citizen, is thinking, where could I more affordably live for the next 10, 15 years that isn't this high populated downtown?
Living in a van down by the river in a real nice camper van.
Dude, you ain't lying. And I got asked this question the other day, like, why aren't more people just going out into the woods? Like making a house, build a house, find a good YouTube tutorial, right? And get out there. Oh, it's just me and you, Randall.
It's all right. We'll keep going.
Like what's preventing that? And what's preventing it is our tax system. They have to permit you, they have to tax you, they got to keep tabs on you, and they don't allow for creative financing around shelter. It's a 30-year mortgage, it's a 15-year mortgage. It has to be on a permitted piece of land that has a tax record attached to it. There's so much red tape around housing, and I don't see a world where, even if we were to kick out the institutional investor of the Blackstone, because I know that's where this conversation question got started, the whole system is built around the control. So they can keep making money off of every single last person that lives in a property. And to the tune of today's interest rates, again, I don't know that there's any one specific fix to making housing affordable again. I certainly don't think it's, let's just kick out all institutional investors. That would help, but it definitely wouldn't, quote unquote, solve the problem.
It's interesting because like I'm one of those people, right, that bought a home before the interest rates shot through the roof. And I remember seeing one of your reels just off the top of my head, just popped into my mind, where you were talking about people who purchase homes, with these lower interest rates and how we're kind of ledged up, so to speak, where we can't move, to a different house because of fear of, well, we can't afford
Yeah.
the new interest,
The golden handcuffs. You're locked
yeah,
in.
golden handcuffs. Absolutely. It's a really good way to put it. And then when it comes to like land, what in land usage and getting out there and building your own, doing the American dream of finding some small spot and doing something with it and eventually have your white picket fence. I hunt. I do elk hunting, I do deer hunting, turkey hunting. I'm out in the woods. Just the last week I spent 4 days living out of the back of my Jeep trying to get an elk. And when you see the access to not just public lands, but like the access to purchase, some of these properties. Technically speaking, I live in the state of Washington. Washington's public land is a joke. We have a few national forests, and the rest is owned by private timber companies. The largest landowner in the state of Washington is the Vagon brothers. Two fellows that own I think it's like the third most amount of active live timber in the United States, and they don't let people hunt their land. And if they do, it costs an extreme amount of money. And these areas where you could do that style of living, or you could go kind of off grid, even if you purchase that plot, the access to purchasing that plot, you might be surrounded by entirely private land. And so there's the zoning, the sale of private lands, what Senator Mike Lee's trying to do with the sale of private lands and privatizing private lands, put them in the hands of some corporations. It's again appalling from my standpoint, from a person who spends a lot of time out in the woods. I'll see this perfect, oak forest out in the woods. And I'm like, man, if I can get to that, and then I zoom out on my phone, and I just realize it's entirely surrounded by so and so's ranch corporation. And it's like, well, how do I get access to that private land? excuse me, that public land that's completely surrounded by private. If you think about it, that ranch essentially owns that land because they won't allow people access to it. There's a lot of zoning laws just in public land access right now in the United States that need to be addressed as well.
You know what's funny about the zoning laws is a lot of people who get into the weeds of real estate will tell you by the end of their travels through the real estate rabbit hole that a lot of the problems we face today do come down to zoning. When you really get to the root of it, 75% of the dirt in America is single family zoning. That's an issue. And when you talk about corporate industrial use, like when you get into commercial zoning, it gets so complex, insanely complex. What a lot of people don't know is the zoning laws are inherently racist and are inherently
Yeah,
discriminatory
absolutely.
because they were put in place before a black man or a woman's mortgage or income could even count toward a mortgage. We didn't start doing that till 1974, but most of the zoning laws were put in place by 71, the Fair Credit Housing Act. So we're literally saying a bank was allowed to say no because you were a black man or you were a woman or you were Latino, and we already had the rules set in place on who's going to buy, why, and where.
Yeah. Not
So
to
this is
mention
great.
the good old boys club that is land ownership in the United States.
Yep.
So there's that as well, just to add insult to injury.
Yeah. And there's, like, for example, there's this thing called a MUD. A MUD is a mixed unit development, and it was given its name because it mucks up property values. And that's why you don't see a lot of neighborhoods that build with single family, some townhome, little bit of vertical. Here's an apartment complex with it. You don't see that a lot because zoning wise, you can't do it for the most part. And when you do see MUDs pop up, they've been given that name because they muck up property values, because we're allowing a lesser financially well off person to be able to have access to property. And that is what's held back a lot of just this, this. I don't want to say like dispersing the wealth. That sounds so socialist, but it is. We have rules in place that do disperse the wealth. It just disperses it to the top.
Yeah.
There are rules that can be put in place and have been put in place already that make that happen. And it's clear and obvious. And those are just some of the guardrails that have been ripped out or even placed in our society to make it seem like, oh, this is just the way it's always been. Well, yeah, maybe that's the case, but who makes the case that that's wrong? I do. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it's always been correct.
Yeah, challenging that status quo for sure. So, yeah.
Like just investing in real estate as a whole. Just that. Why can't we challenge that idea? Why can't we challenge the idea of speculating around the value increasing and your tenant paying your rent every month as a form of investment? Why can't we challenge that as an idea? Why can't we challenge the idea of getting rid of corporate investing as a whole altogether? Purchasing property for profit altogether. That could solve a lot of problems.
So then this leads to a question that we have for you is that, so you talked about mom and pop investors and you talked about your institutional investors. Do you think there's a difference between the two, right? And should rent seeking behavior like that, should it be really allowed for anyone to own more than one residence, say?
I'll put a couple things out here. Immediately, I think anybody who is considered an institutional investor should be barred from ever being able to invest in real estate ever again. We can't get them to sell. You can incentivize to sell by possibly saying, hey, if you don't live in this property, your property taxes are doubled. Immediately, that would add more funding to the state and also disincentivize ownership and possibly incentivize some sales. The other side to the part is the mom and pop. Now, this is where it gets a little hairy. I firmly believe investors are the reason we lack affordable supply for the next generation. We have not seen the level of investor purchasing and the level of just participating in real estate investing as a normal everyday citizen of America today than we've ever seen. It is so popular. And we all saw the seminars and we all saw the infomercials and we've all seen the books and the gurus and the Dave Ramseys and Grant Cardones of the world who've been preaching it for decades. So it's no surprise we're reaching the end stage of that game. We've been playing the wealth accumulation game through land purchasing, through home ownership for a very long time. Mom and pops, I believe, should be barred by certain restrictions. I think that no property that hits the market should be able to get an offer from somebody planning to rent it out for the first 45 days. I think it should have to sit for a month and a half before they can even present an offer. I also think that when an offer is presented and accepted, there should be some form of fee. If you're a veteran and you go to use your VA loan, you have to pay a VA funding fee. I think an investor should have to pay a fee, and that fee could go toward a first-time homebuyer fund for that very state. If they own more property, the fee could go up, just like a tax bracket.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it is I think mom and pops largely are the problem because 20% of that, I'm about to say 4/5 of the total investor purchases are mom and pops, are people that own 10 or less units. So adding fees, messing with the property tax structure, I think can disincentivize some of that. Also putting a bearing of the offer until a certain time frame and barring altogether institutional corporate investing would definitely help ease the burden. I think a lot of people would get in my face if I ever said we just need to get rid of home investing as a whole. That would be a long, lengthy weed the pole out of our country because we've been doing it for so
Right.
long, and we do need a rental market. So there needs to be a common balance, but we need to buy, or I'm sorry, we need to purchase the we need to have purchasable homes for the next generation. Right now, those homes aren't being built. Right now, those homes aren't available. And right now, all those homes are typically getting more expensive in those markets. So again, I just speak to the next generation and saying the current generation and past generations investment in real estate's growth is exactly what's keeping them out of getting started. And that sucks.
Yeah. Doing a lot of work up in Canada like I do, I get exposed to the timber market that comes down to the United States, and I think they supply something like 26%
A
of
lot of our softwood lumber, a
the
lot of it.
softwood lumber, right? And so like when you're talking about these new homes and if stuff can get built, the price of homes is just going to go up with these tariffs. And so when you just from construction. So when you look at that, it's only going to be exacerbated in my mind over the next, foreseeable 3 years at least.
You're
Until
hitting the nail on the
this
head.
tariff stuff kind of
You're
goes
hitting the
or
nail
goes
on the
away or
head.
calms down.
We have, and also when people talk about '08, well, we don't have adjustable rate mortgages anymore. We don't have subprime mortgages getting given out. And also 40% of homes today are owned outright. They don't even have mortgages. 40% of homes in America don't even have mortgages. And like we just said, 1 out of 3 homes being purchased now are being purchased by investors, not real people. So how much financial strife does our economy need to get to in order for home prices to drop significantly? I'd argue it'd have to be awful before we started seeing home prices drop.
Yeah.
Well, then too, if you think about it just from the building standpoint, when I purchased my home in 2018, I was talking to our realtor. We're lucky enough to be at the bottom end of a cul-de-sac. So we have this kind of odd shaped property where we get 2 massive side yards. And our realtor, when he was putting the show on for the house, was just like they would never build anything like this nowadays. He's like the zoning for this would never get approved. He's like this would be 4 condos before it would be a house like this. You know what I mean? So when you think about that, where these houses are getting built, the price of these houses is going up. The buyers of these homes are people that aren't first time home buyers. They're not low income families. These buyers of these homes are people who are buying them for the sole purpose of renting them out in perpetuity. When does that cycle? How do we interrupt that cycle? Or is there a process in place already where people are actively fighting against this? Is there someone who is currently working for legislation trying to get something passed through the Trump
No,
administration?
but I can tell you the exact person working against it, billionaires and corporations lobbying.
Yeah.
There's so much lobbying that goes on to make sure that there were cap limits suggested in certain state courts that never made it to vote. We've had votes for banning institutional investors. I believe Nevada just tried again, didn't go through. There's been a lot of attempts, but we know that lobbying rules all in our government. Since Citizens United of 2010, they've just been throwing billions and billions into it. There's just not a one size fits all solution to fixing the housing market right now. It's going to go up in price.
Is there really enough attention to like the average day American to know that this like essentially war on real estate is happening kind of unread
No,
under their
there's
noses?
not. And man, I wish I could just put together an hour-long video that everybody could see and I could just walk us through. This isn't something that's just going to fix itself.
Right.
This isn't some systemic, oh, sometimes it's expensive, sometimes it's not. Like that's such a whack, just talking point. It's not
It's as whack of a
historically or
talking point to
economically
think that
accurate.
there's well, it's as whack of a talking point to think that there's going to be some golden knight in the Senate who's going to be able to get some legislation passed through with the amount of
Yeah,
lobbying, like you're saying.
it's a
It's
carrot
going to
on a
take
stick.
pressure from the average day, everyday Joe to make a change.
What's crazy too is I think that, Randall, you and I talked about this as far as with what we're going to do to set up our kids potentially. And we've even talked about potentially if we're at a point where we have to choose what we set our kids up with, real estate now would almost be the preferred investment other than compared to investing in, say, their education anymore. Just something to potentially be able to put them in a spot to be able to own that home because I don't, Zach, I think you can speak a little bit more to this, but I mean, your first time home buyer that you see right now, who does fall into that average income category, are they say getting help from someone above, from someone that's looking out for them, or are they having to settle for that home that they're going to have to put gallons of sweat equity into? What's going on? What are you seeing?
Well, the average first-time home buyer is receiving help from above. More than 51%, I think the number is 51, 53%, are receiving gifts from family members. And usually that's 5,000 or more. I've seen some pretty large gifts. So I would caution anybody immediately who frequents the Facebook feed, say, oh my God, Sandra was able to do it. A lot of times there's help. A lot of times there's help. Even just letting them live with family for 2 years while they get their nest egg up is a huge help. I would say right now there's no real solution, man. Like, of course, you can get your credit above 640, and of course, you can have a high-paying job and not take on stupid debt, and you can get to the point where maybe you can clear $2,000-$3,000 a month, and you can afford a mortgage. But I don't think a world where rates come down is anywhere near us without money printing. So I don't think you're going to be able to refi it anytime soon. Yes, I think the home prices go up, but at the same exact time frame, do I think that they're going to go up to be a worthwhile investment versus something else you could buy with that money? Maybe not. So I think the most creative and best option I'm seeing more and more is family compounds, living with different generations of family. I think that is the coolest, best possible option. And we have American dream propagandized our country into believing moving out at 18 is the move.
Right.
And I'm here to tell you, that just gets you another electric bill, another car bill, and another tax bill to your county. Living with your family is the worst thing you can do for macro corporations and billionaires because you're going to have less consumer spend in your household. You're going to be a more tightly knit community. You're going to be less separated. And frankly, you're going to be more well off. And to be able to have like a mini farm and grow your own food and have a couple goats and be next door, maybe you hate your in-laws. Maybe that's not a good thing, but maybe you love them. All this to say, like, there isn't a traditional option right now. You have to make about 100 grand just to get involved in the purchasing of real estate conversation. And as rates maybe trickle down, maybe that gets more affordable. Maybe we get back to 90K, 85K. Maybe that's more tolerable. But the fact of the matter is we have a wage problem. We have corporations that have been making profits upon profits for quarter after quarter, year after year, decade after decade, all without paying the worker, the person producing the productivity. I got into a conversation with a multimillionaire guy, and I'm going to have him on the podcast soon. And we're going back and forth about affordability. And he's a big trade guy. Get into the trades. And I agree. Getting into the trades, you're avoiding AI and you're putting something into your hands and you're giving yourself control over your future. I love the trades. I think a lot of trade schools should also teach a little bit of business and entrepreneurship because the two are very different, but one often leads to the next. Or that's to the side. And he sent me this article from Ford saying, we need car repairmen. We need technicians. We're struggling right now for mechanics. We need more people to get into the trades. This is young people not getting into the trades. That's what he had sent me. But immediately I go on to Ford's website. I see what they're paying. I asked chat for a prior review of what they were paying 3 years ago. And I get a report and I'm like, okay, cool. They increased their pay from $25.50 to $28 an hour.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we know why Nobody is working for them because they're not paying a livable wage. We have a wage problem, not a laziness problem. Why would a young man or woman get their knees into a hardworking blue collar job workforce that still isn't going to allot them the ability to get a car or a mortgage? It
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense. So of course they're trying to side hustle themselves into being content creators on TikTok and YouTube because it seems like the path of least resistance. At least it's mathematically possible.
Not
If they
even
go and just become a plumber, they may get locked in only making 65 grand a year for the next 10 years and they're broke.
not even to mention how difficult it's become to work on, like a simple mechanics job these days. The manufacturers of a lot of these vehicles make them so you can't. You have to take them to a specific place. It's not like your everyday, old Honda that can be held together with paper clips and bubble gum and still somehow
Well,
work.
and then
Course.
warranties play a huge factor
Yeah.
with this too. If a car is under warranty, they may only pay a tech, point 0.6 of what it would normally be worth to fix it because they have all these different contracts with how they get paid out. So
And then you have people getting laid off. And the fact of the matter is, the way we track unemployment in this country only tracks them if they're doing absolutely nothing while unemployed. If they're getting a DoorDash order in, if they do an Uber ride, they're no longer unemployed. If they just quit because they can't find anything, no longer unemployed. If they stop searching for more than 4 weeks, no longer unemployed. So we have all these people on the sidelines that literally aren't employed and can't find work. 10.4% of them are under 30, by the way. There's an unemployment rate of 10.4% for the under 30 demographic. We're walking into a very strange economy. And I think we're on the precipice of a large, large, large shift, a very large economic shift. So I don't know what would be on the other side of that, but we need something seismic to shift to make affordability possible for the next
It's
generation.
it's interesting to think about something like that being brought upon naturally though, because like in my mind, something like a large, large, large shift would be brought about by, a worldwide once in a lifetime pandemic. And here that came and went, and I feel like it made it worse.
You're right, because we printed our way out of it. The same exact reason that 2008 was supposed to be worse than it was is because we kicked the economic can down the road by
Down the road.
printing QE1, QE2, QE3, QE4, and we're probably coming up on QE5 in 2026 because the bond market is yelling, the SOFR fund is screaming, and our dollar is inflating all while it's weakening. Everything
Yeah,
is
well,
yelling.
it's less and less every day. Yeah.
Yes. So everything is screaming, but yet we're the fastest growing economy, white hot, everything is beautiful. It just doesn't make sense. Inflation is dead. What'd you go slay it in battle? It's still 2.9%, fuckhead. Like, what are we talking about?
Make Argentina great again.
20 billion, baby. Send it to them. And
Oh,
that's a
Jesus.
great
40. They
example
just doubled
of,
it today. 40
is it
40
40?
Are
million
you serious?
or
40.
40 billion, excuse me.
Jeez.
Yeah, they
But
just they
but
just
to
doubled
be
it
but
today.
okay, so let's break that down. What's 40 billion? All right. So that's 40 billion is 40,000 million. That's 40,000 million. That's 40 million thousands. So what's that? 4 million, 10,000s. So we could give $10,000 in down payment assistance to 4 million first time home buyers
Yeah.
with that money.
Yeah. And
One
and at
thing.
the same time not completely collapse the United States farming industry by
Well, that was
selling out
done
the
with the
soybean
soybean
farmers.
tariff. That's done.
Yeah.
It's just every direction you look, from private equity ownership of childcare facilities, healthcare facilities, or draining companies driving these leveraged bailouts. We have stock buybacks inflating the entire S&P 500. If you strip the top 7 companies from the S&P 500, it's been draining for the past 4 years, not outperforming. It's all AI stocks. That's the only money that's going into corporations right now, or corporations pushing for AI investment. We're in a gigantic bubble. It's just a matter of where does it pop and what comes from it. I'm of the belief, though, that when it does, housing will be one of the most held onto assets. And there's too many people that only have $800, $1,200 payments that I don't think are going to get pushed hard enough to need to sell, that would drive this giant price drop like we saw from 2006 to 2008. I think more so people will stay sheltered in place, and it'll cause a world where the K-shaped economy reaps its ugly head. People with assets kind of buckle down and survive, and everyone outside is like, I'm dying.
Yeah, the problem is that everyone outside is more than half the country.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's getting worse. The wealth gap keeps growing.
When that happens, your job is going to be your your income is going to be your most valuable asset at that point if you are on the bottom of that K-shaped economy, correct?
To an extent, but income alone isn't going to do it anymore. Unless your income is a 6-digit number or more, we're in a world where a fixed income position isn't getting you anywhere. Like I used to be able to, if you had a 620 credit score, no dumb debt, no stupid car, and made 50 grand a year because it's your fifth year at Subway, I could get you a house. $1,000 monthly payment, almost nothing down, USDA loan. And we very quickly moved into a world where that's not even plausible. We're a cop. That's not even plausible. A nurse,
Teacher.
military serviceman. What are we going to do in 5, 10 years when all of these people can't afford shelter? We need to be doing something about it now because it's a growing problem right in front of our face while we're being yelled at that everything's good. Everything's great. We have so much extra money, we're going to start throwing it to other countries.
I
Meanwhile,
mean,
everyone.
look at the line at the food banks right now because of the government shutdown with these military families. It just shows you how many of these military families, active military families, are living paycheck to paycheck.
Well, there's no worse financial. There's no one least in the financial astuteness than a military couple. Unfortunately, as a veteran, a veteran is probably the least financially sound person. Unfortunately, they don't teach finance. A lot of times, they're getting in because they don't have another way to make money, and I think we're seeing that in their paycheck to paycheck. They already have been. We're seeing how close we are to cracking with little stuff like that. When it only takes one missed paycheck from one side of the family, of course, there's probably some dual income military in there, but when it only takes one paycheck to increase food hall lines, soup halls, all these different places where they're giving out food, increased by what was it, 30%, 40%?
Wow.
That's
Starts to
that's
look
an
like
incredible
pictures from
increase.
the 30s, man, 1929. And you start to see the soup line pictures. It's just the only difference is they're in color now and they're in uniform. It's worse.
Yeah.
Is that where you think it's headed?
I barring some sort of, like we said, big change that comes upon naturally, like for the greater good of the United States, I think that there's no way but for us to go towards a huge depression like that.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me working in international logistics as longshore, I know that we haven't hit the bottom yet. It's just it's scary to
What makes you say that?
uh
Haven't hit the bottom yet.
so just because, I mean, you see the cans coming in, it's the volume of the cans coming in from overseas is just not where it was, right? Like at my level of the workforce so far, um I've been maybe getting 1 or 2 shifts a week when I was used to getting 5 to 7 shifts, in the years prior. And that that volume's just not there. The consumer confidence and spending is just not there. And it's and what makes me think that I don't think we've hit the bottom yet is that when Trump's jerking around the tariffs like he is, it leads us, we don't know what's going to happen, right? So everyone's holding close to, holding close to the chest what they got as far as with money they might have in savings, with just holding off on those bigger purchases, your consumer purchases like you can get from a store, but they're still holding off on that. And yeah, I don't think we've hit the bottom of the shipping industry. That's for sure.
Well, John, I think it's astute that you talk about something that not a lot of people talk about because there's not a physical piece of data that we can put behind it, but uncertainty is a huge driver in what I think will inevitably happen, good or bad.
Yeah. And so, what would you say if we talked about these people who, in the other part of the K-shaped economy, are sometimes screaming that everything's okay, right? What would you? And sometimes what they're screaming also is that buying a home is not a birthright. It's not the American birthright to be able to own a home. What would you say to those people?
I would start it with the question of why do they think that is? Why do you think it's not a birthright? And I guarantee the conversation will move into how hard they had to work to get their home, which is true, which is true. They did have to scrape a lot of times did have to forego a specific lifestyle. Um, but I would counter argue with why is shelter not an American birthright? What would we do in a world where millions upon millions of people can't afford to live anywhere? Like, are you going to love the community that comes from that? Are you going to love the downtown experience of 1 out of 5 of your townspeople being able to not afford a shelter? I mean, I would ask them what do they think the repercussions of the next generation not having access to shelter would be? And to also get into the weeds of what they had to do to grind to get into that home, because breaking down the numbers with them, though it's not always going to win the person or win the argument, the very least it's not going to get heated. And at the for at least me, I can see in the math where they're jacked up and be a little bit more solidified in my belief that they're full of BS. The problem is a lot of boomers think that there's financial savants, when in reality, they just didn't make nearly as many financial mistakes. Like, for example, their job set up their IRA. Their job set up their 401k. They're the one investing for them. Yes, they put some money aside each year, and that's great. Good job. Yes, they bought the cheapest car on the lot and paid 75 bucks a month, but that's not obtainable today. And yes, they did push aside date night and not go out and get coffee. And the percentage of expense versus what they were making, that was a significant marker. But now you could buy avocado toast 36,000 times before you're getting to the point where it's enough to save for a down payment for a house. So I don't think things like that are a proper argument. The work hard side of the argument too has become a lot more whitewashed, where we did have a world where you could kind of move up the corporate ladder quickly by the time you're late 20s, early 30s at an income where you can buy a home. That was the difference maker. The sooner you get into an investment, the better. And when you're able to get into a home by 28, by 58, of course you're set. Of course you're good to go. And of course you'd be yelling at anybody who isn't doing it at 28. Why aren't you doing this? You big silly dummy idiot.
Yep. And you said it.
They're not sitting down and looking at all the new expenses. They're not sitting down and looking at the numbers. Like, for example, let me bring up a number real quick. Let me find it. Let me see if I can scroll through real fast. I did a little table on the differences between 10 different years and costs, and I'm trying to find it really fast. I'm under pressure. I'm sweating.
Are you
While you're-
essentially
while you're
talking
doing that-
our luxury costs versus our necessities costs? Because I know that where like
Absolutely.
you're saying with the avocado toast, it would take 36,000 times of you buying avocado toast to get into the home down payment area. So the
Yeah.
prior generation was able to forego luxuries and actually be able to do something with that because
Yes.
luxuries were
Yes,
more
the cost
expensive.
of utilities has gone up when the cost of luxuries has stayed is actually deflated.
Correct.
Like, think about a TV. A TV has deflated so much in price. A trip, a hotel, a plane ticket. Those things are actually not inflating too heavily right now. The luxuries of life aren't. But if you look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, if you look at their CPI index, the ones that lead the charge: electric bill, healthcare, rent, automotive. These are the things that are core to life. They aren't optional. And yeah, I did a analysis of all of the years, and I found 1993 to 1998 was actually one of the most affordable times to get started. And I compared that to today. So I did a lifestyle of a little bit of luxury, just a wee bit. So we got housing, 2 cars, food for the house, childcare for 2 kids. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 kid, gas for the car insurance, power, phone, healthcare, student debt for 1 person, internet, and then here's where we get a little luxurious. A little bit of personal care, shampoo and all, a little bit of entertainment, go out to the movies, clothing, optional luxury, and saving and investing, obviously a luxury. So for 1995, I have a total per month of $2,788 for all of those items to be checked. We got $758 for a house, $233 for a car, $242 for your grocery bill. Moving down, I got $33 for personal care, $124 for entertainment. Wow, that's a lot of movies. And $200 saved. So all those together, you're paying $2,788 all throughout the year. That's $33,456, and the median income was $34,000. Cool, math works. You can live this lifestyle,
and maybe even save some.
And you're I even budgeted in putting some. Yeah, there's more room on the bone, and that's only one income. Okay, now let's move forward to 2025. I put the median income at $80,000. Some would say that's a bit inflated. I think it might be around that number. So we'll do $80,000. Same numbers: housing, one car, food, blah, blah, blah. All those numbers combined, if I were to take housing, 2207, that's a low number. Car, 518. Food, 860 is the standard for a house with a young family right now. Child's care is no longer 166 for one child. The median is 1328. That's a mortgage payment to keep your child cared for.
That's low. I pay probably $1,800. Well,
dude, I believe
low.
it. I fully believe it. They're all going. Health insurance, 667, Social Security paying in at 604. You may not even see it. And again, to the luxuries, I have $64 for personal care, $300 for entertainment, $146 for clothing, $300 for savings and investment. Barely anything. Your 2025 bill per month will be $9,897 to cover all of those items.
Yeah, that seems realistic.
Per year, that'd be $118,764 over that $80,000 median income. You're not in a surplus. You're in a deficit of $38,764. If you make the median household income and you try to raise a young family without being like the most prudent, never do anything, you never even go and get food from Subway lifestyle, you're still 35 grand plus in the hole every single year. So when you say, I don't understand, you said at the beginning, I don't get how some people are doing it. I don't understand how some people are doing it. It's just not the same. It's not the same. And all while that's happening, the wealth gap has been growing. All while corporations are growing. All while CEO pay is going absolutely crazy. The median person in America is not getting paid. The numbers speak for themselves. The normal median income needs to be closer to 120 grand a year, and we're about 40 grand off that. And if we were to hit that number, a lot of problems would get solved. The problem is I just don't think we're getting there.
Yeah. And then you just have you have the pushback from, once again, I hate to keep saying boomer, 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 but it just always goes back to bootstraps. It just always goes back to that. And I'm like, you guys, it's more than that. The reality of the situation is that people just aren't, to be able to just survive. People aren't making enough money. We're talking about this luxuries versus necessary expenses. And I think that's kind of sometimes too where the disconnect comes in, is they're like, well, maybe I would have been okay with just having a rental, being okay with renting if I would have been able to afford all these luxuries at a lower price, right? Like it's almost like that idea, like, well, you have a cushy life. You could potentially afford that cushy life of having your nice TV, having your video game system, being able to afford these little trinkets. But I think that denies the fact that it's surface level stuff, right? Like, that's not really what a fulfilling life is going to bring, right? The fulfilling life is, to me, is starting that family, being able to have those dinners with everyone around a nice table, being able to share those experiences, something that you not necessarily can get from just renting a little apartment, something that you want to build, that you can be proud of. And it's tough because I'm not looking for sympathy, right? When I started getting active with bringing more attention to this matter, and like I said before, Randall and I, we're doing okay, right? Like, we fall into like that upper average, right? We're doing okay, but we know people out there are struggling, and we know people out there just, it's crazy. I have no idea how they're doing it. So, yeah.
Well, it's beautiful that you care, man. And I think you articulated it really well to say to say it that way, that there's just you're not in that position, but you see others that are, and you want to be a voice for it. That's awesome.
Yeah, we really do. Um, we kind of talked a little bit about what we can do, right? Or what we're not seeing. Obviously, we are not seeing any real consumer advocacy, but we are seeing corporate lobbying interests. We are seeing private equity getting in everything, driving up utility bills because they're funding these AI data centers, right? And they're doing it kind of fly by night under the radar, hoping that people don't attend these public hearings. And do you think that there are actually any politicians that you see right now? Are there any that you see on our side that are actually going to do anything for us?
That's a great question. It's difficult to say without personally knowing anybody. I can only speak to what I see in the actions of like what do they vote for? And they're going to vote with their donor's preference, the ones that have been lobbied to all heck. I do think there are some shining lights that come through in the Thomas Masseys and the Ro Khannas. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been saying some good things. But to say that any of them are outright fighting for the working class individual with their vote, I wouldn't say there's anyone that I point out to. I love that the Rose and the Masseys are fighting for Epstein and fighting for real corruption, or for Epstein's disclosure and justice for victims. I love that. I love that they're fighting the system, but ultimately they're not necessarily doing anything to promote the price drops that we need nationwide to get corporate greed out of our ecosystems. Largely because, again, I don't think there's any one specific thing that could be done. And I can't imagine the billions, if not trillions of dollars of funds that would campaign against them, lobby against them if they tried.
Right.
You know who's one politician who's running who I'm actually really excited for? I'm living in the wrong Portland, I tell my friends, is that Graham Plattner.
Oh, yeah, out there in Maine.
In
Yeah,
Maine.
I just DM'd him the other day, just shouting him out, saying how cool he is. Yeah,
that guy
I like him.
is his short form videos that he puts out are just so well done, where he'll be sitting in a room full of people who do not agree with him on anything, and he can win them over in 30 seconds. And maybe it's selective editing,
The same thing.
but he's saying things that are speaking to the everyday American. It's not speaking
Yeah.
to the power brokers that are in the world. And that's really where I think where a lot of the people that voted for Donald Trump, where they had that delusionment that they were doing something that represented the common people.
That, Randall, that is why I start with questions and empathy, because I believe we are primed for a social revolt. And though the social revolt group would look to MAGA as the larger proportion of the problem, they're proof that even that generation wants change and
Exactly.
sees the insidiousness. They were branded to think that this person, this Trump, was going to be the guy to drain the swamp, but they voted to drain the swamp. We all recognize a swamp. It's just our definition of who we think's in it. So I think you're spot on where we have proof that they want the same thing we want. We're just getting branded to hate each other. And I think he's a great example of exactly what you're saying. But let me tell you right now, someone I'm not a fan of. This might come as a surprise, but that Mom Donnie guy knew.
Really?
He is, in my opinion, the weakness in our armor right now politically. All it took is a decent looking young guy to say, I don't rock with billionaires. We should tax them. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to Israel. That doesn't seem to matter. And boom, he's going to get a political position. That's terrifying. And I think it speaks to how tired the American population is with those two items, A. But B, it could lead to political uprising of people that don't deserve the position. And frankly, outside of those 2 points, have some pretty whack ideas. So I do like what he stands for up there. And like you said, Portland, Maine. I don't know the rest of the line items he would push. And that's where it's difficult because I think that there's going to be a lot of people, I think, that try to benefit off of the tiredness, the fatigue
Oh,
we
yeah.
have with billionaire control. And there's going to be some people to try to leverage that. I think one by the name of JD Vance is already prepping that campaign.
Oof, yeah. Oof.
If there was a politician I'd say do not trust, it would be a JD Vance. And I am terrified of him linking up with a Ro Khanna or a Massey and running because he would win.
I'm personally a believer that JD Vance isn't. I wouldn't even call him. I might, it might even sound weird to say, but I wouldn't even call him a politician. I think that he is a product of a system. I think that like his short stint as a senator was primarily to get the position of vice president.
Yeah,
In the later
let's
term.
not separate the cause from the problem. The political system is that system you're talking about. So it's not like he's operating in some different field. It's all
That's true.
that political system. Because yes, he was funded by Peter Thiel.
Peter
He was
Thiel.
given his position by Peter Thiel. He's funded for his campaign effort and his connection back with
and
Trump by Peter Thiel.
his entire background is, you know, fabricated at best with the hillbilly
Yes,
elegy and all that. So it's like I said, he was a steam train running into politics that then has continued to up ramp in my mind.
but I'm sure, and just like anybody who got their first whiff of him was like, wow, this is a very well put together. He can actually answer a question. He's not avoiding things, or at least he does it in a better way.
Loves
You know,
couches.
he and he can and two, he can sit on. I remember like a Vivek
Sit on the couch.
Ramaswamy or even a Bernie Sanders who could actually sit and have a conversation without having to avoid topics or fub around with things. There was a lot of benefit to those people, but at the same time, we need to be fearful. Just because a man has a sharp tongue doesn't mean his heart's in the right place. And the devil has the sharpest of tongues. And I think a Peter Thiel who's obsessed with the Antichrist is one that we should keep an eye on.
We're kind of dancing around the social revolt energy, I feel like, in the United States that was building. And I don't know, I don't want to get too tinfoil hat, too conspiracy here, but it's just
No, I know it doesn't look it, but this is a tinfoil hat. I had it hyperfixed to look like straw.
You know, I think that Randall and I teased this out a little bit in the last episode, is that right now the powers that be are doing everything that they can to keep left and right at odds, rather than putting that energy in these issues that we're talking about, a top-down change, top-down revolution, if you would call it. And we kind of both feel that the sad demise of a conservative podcaster in Charlie Kirk essentially is one of those things that is pitting right and left right now, where if something like that didn't happen, there will be a lot more of this right-wing fervor and this right-wing energy going to where it needs to go, which is being mad at the people that are keeping us in chains, right? Rather than demonizing your neighbor on the left with this radical left, these far left lunatics, right? And it's, like I said, I know you're wearing your tinfoil hat over there, but it's
No, you're
just kind of
absolutely
at a
right, man.
loss.
Let's just walk through the facts real quick. Let's walk through the facts about Charlie Kirk. We know only what we've been told, in that a 30-06 round traveled 186 so meters from the corner of the top of the lobby building from a Tyler Robinson who had his grandpa's rifle. And that 30-06 round lodged itself in his neck, that the camera to the left and the camera behind them still held by Turning Point. There's actually a third camera too, still held by Turning Point. We have George Zinn, the old white man who was also filming 9/11 and at Bush and Trump and Clinton's inauguration. They're claiming at first that he shot him and got arrested for it, only to get released and then brought back on child pornography charges. That was weird. Then we get to more information with these texts, and they're using squad car and drop point and the weapon, like just weird militaristic styles of talking for two gay kids. Like it's just not the way that they would talk. And now we don't know where Tyler Robinson's boyfriend is. He disappeared off the face of the earth. They haven't said anything about it. There was no crime scene set up where Kirk was shot, no forensics, no yellow tape. In fact, they're continuing construction there as we
They're
speak.
paving right over the crime scene.
Paving right over it. The same camera shot the security footage that shows Tyler Robinson jumping off of the building with the weapon broken down, because he doesn't have the weapon on him. It has to be broken down in his pant leg or his backpack. To put it together and break it down is not a quick process, but then he put it back together to store it. Oh, and then we're told it was in a wooded area where they found it. It was found in the backyard 3 doors down from his house near a chicken coop. It wasn't in a wooded area. It was right down the road from his house. And now we're told that Tyler only got caught because he admitted it to his dad. He spent 34 hours evading the FBI and CIA only to get caught because he told his pop. None of it makes sense to me, and I think it's only for division. I'm not here to say who did it or why, but I think just like Epstein, Patel and Bondi are running a cover-up. There's no argument you could give me at this point outside of just giving me the actual facts if they actually were to line up, which I don't think they would. I think Tyler Robinson was set up there. I don't think he ever had a weapon. I think he was set up there to, when the bullet fires, run, and you're going to go down for it, because I think that in some way, shape, or form they were blackmailed. Tyler Robinson's boyfriend was very known for being big on the dark web and their hatred for Charlie. And so I think they got him on something. There's been plenty of movies, plenty of shows about it. They get him on something, and then they get the little earpiece and they're like, cool, you're going to do X. And this is why. And then this is going to happen, and you're going to not do anything, or else we're going to tell people about this. And I think that's an easy way to set it up. I don't think it's coincidental that texts are being shown that he had a disdain toward Israel and his donors right beforehand. I don't think that's coincidental that he shifted his opinion. But ultimately, I think we're being lied to. And I think that there's a population of our country that's going to get more divisive and more heels dug in when they see a leader or a martyr like that go down. And I think that the Republican side's capitalizing on that big time. And there's going to be another side that sees it as an opportunity to condemn the person that's honoring them. And we're seeing that in real time too. So the middle ground is, I think the entire thing was a lie and a fabrication, and we need to get to the root of it. And it seems like everyone wants to argue with each other instead. And that's where a lot of our issues come down to. When we're talking about housing affordability, we'd much rather argue with our neighbor than talk about the people buying the neighborhood. Like, we'd much rather argue blue and red and ignore who's stealing the green. And it's constantly happening. And they're uncomfortable topics when you talk about, oh, this is just all a big game that's been set up for us to play in so that they can get more wealth. That's an uncomfortable conversation to say that this whole thing has just been rigged for you to lose, and some are going to make it out, but the majority won't. It's tough because, again, you have an entire group of people that are benefiting off of it. You have an entire generation that's well off because of it. And it's tough to tell them that it's changing when they operated in a different world.
Yeah. Yep. And that's exactly why we started this podcast, was to have a chance to bring people together, right? Because I know, especially after the Charlie Kirk deal, I posted some things, right, saying I didn't like the guy. I don't think he deserved to be disposed in that manner, or in any manner, really. But I was trying to say, people viewed him as an oppressor, and especially if you fall into one of those subcategories that is viewed as that would view him as such, as an oppressor, you might not be honoring his death, right? And I even got some flack for that. And I'm just here trying to say, no, we're trying to keep this dialogue going. We're trying to, maybe people who haven't been in the role of the oppressed, right, who can't understand their situation, we're trying to say, like, hey, this might be a reason why they might be feeling this way. It's a core understanding of empathy, right? And, I am not of the opinion that empathy aligns you with help. I am of the opinion that empathy is one of the tenets of, you could say, the Christian faith, or many faiths, right? As putting yourself in the shoes of your neighbor. And so, yeah, that's why we started this. It's why we're thankful that you came on today. And we want to keep the conversation going, because we don't want people, we want to get to the same point. We don't want to just be barking left and right. We want to try and get the dialogue to a point where we can salvage something, because I think that America's worth salvaging. And I think that we believe that there should be hope, even if it doesn't feel like there's any. We want to try and bring some hope.
I think it's something that needs to be pointed out where you look at John, right? So John, you voted for Donald Trump in 2016, right?
I did.
And there were people who, that first administration, that first time he got elected, I voted for Hillary Clinton. There was people that on the Democratic side would look for an excuse to cut people like John off, to be like, oh, you voted for Trump, never talking to you again. Him and I have mutual friends that won't talk to me to this day because I didn't vote for Donald Trump. And it's interesting because, like, though I lost several friendships the first Trump administration, none of them were because of me. I didn't go, you know what, I'm not talking to that person ever again, blank, you know. And for voting for Trump. And I think it's interesting because on this next Trump administration that just started, you're seeing a lot more of those people trying to start that conversation because they realize we share a lot of the same ideals with stuff. Where for the last 4 years it's been release the Epstein files from the Trump side, the Trump camp, and now that torch seems to have been picked up by, you know, the Democrats or the independents even at where, and then they see us standing next to them at the line yelling with them, and it's kind of like, oh wait, you're here too, shit, you know, what do we have in common, what more do we have in common? And that's where those conversations start, is just by finding those things that we all can rally behind and be like, hey, this is wrong, this needs to be changed. And whether it's, you know, the housing market, the Epstein's scandal, the tariff, you know, wherever you look in the United States, everything is bad. And it's just being able to put people who listen to their constituents rather than the big money donors, rather than their pack, you know, being able to elect as many of those people as possible, getting in front of and not obstructing, but like good troubling the people that will do bad, you know, like filibustering or showing up to their town halls and asking tough questions. Being involved in your community, being involved in local politics used to be something in America where you would be like held kind of like as to a pedestal. But now it's something where you don't really want to be seen as political in the United States because of the backlash it comes with, especially at the local community level. When you have people who will cut you out because you're starting, like John and I, a political podcast where we just want to talk to people. This whole thing started because we had a lot of people that were commenting on our Facebook posts, on our Instagram posts, that would just say, you know, super negative stuff. And then you just like you said, Zach, you just ask them questions, just ask them why. You know, get to that core belief and feeling that left them angered enough to write an upset message on Facebook, and just show them how kind of not in like a snooty way, but like how outrageous that sentiment is, and how it's just coming from a base of emotion. And at the end of the day, we both are upset about a problem, and we might have different ways of coming about to fix it, but at least, you know, if we can work together to do that, that possibility of it being fixed exists in my mind.
Yeah.
If we are continuously fighting, like even with the Charlie Kirk thing, the discussion quickly became, you know, one side saying he's a saint, one side being like, have you listened to literally anything the guy has said in his life? And that became the argument. That became the polarizing thing. And I fell into that trap too, those first couple of weeks where I was being like, I can't believe these people are you know, vindicating this guy and martyrdoming this guy, and like when he said such vile things in the past, he said such vile things on you know, recording after recording. That's the argument right there. That's the argument they wanted to start. It was me defending, you know, or me prosecuting his legacy and them defending his legacy. So I've now tried to back away from any conversation about who Charlie Kirk was. I'd like to focus, like you said, on, you know, why'd that Dairy Queen close down, or how do you take apart a rifle 3 times? I've taken apart quite a few rifles. I have to have tools to do that. You know, my 30-06 can shoot through elk vertebrae. You know, stuff like that. Those are the questions that make you sit down and start, you know, looking at the bigger picture rather than the argument that exists for the red versus blue. If that
Absolutely.
long-winded rant means anything.
No, means everything. They did confirm that Dairy Queen is still open, by the way. That's
It's open?
It is open.
There you go. Frosties all around, boys. That's Wendy's.
Frosties all around,
There
baby.
you go. All
Blizzards.
right.
Blizzards all
Blizzards
around.
all around. Well, Zach, thank you for coming on. It's been a treat. You are our first guest to the Knights of the Round Table podcast here. And yeah, really insightful stuff. Like we all believe the American dream is something worth salvaging, worth fighting for. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
And thank you guys for
thanks a
creating the
bunch, man.
space. And anybody who's listening to y'all is in good hands. Political debate without hate is what we need.
Yeah, if you ever need any questions answered for your finger on the pulse for the Northwest, give us a call.
Yes, please.
You're the man. Appreciate y'all. Thank you for having me, and
you,
I
brother.
look forward to further conversations with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.